Thanks for coming. I hope you guys have lunch. So I think I should probably give a short introduction about myself since I'm not one of the regular names you might have seen. Let me just, can't see the thing. Yeah, so I'm actually an amateur chess player. I don't do chess for a living. I have a background in finance and accounting. So I previously worked as a CFO of a biotech company. I became a GM at a healthy age of 36. So if some of you guys are getting on in age, you know, there's hope still of improvement. And I was only recently appointed as the CEO of the Singapore Chess Federation, so I'm now doing chess full-time. I don't really play a lot, and this is my first tournament after the Chess Olympiad. And clearly, the rustiness is showing in the games in this tournament. So I think when Oscar invited me to give a presentation, and like everyone else, I wanted to present some of my best games against really strong GMs to give people the impression that I'm a good player. But I just thought that it'd be interesting to show some of the games from this event and the common mistakes that a lot of chess players make, especially if you are not a chess professional. And the main topic that I want to talk about is mainly in terms of opening preparation when you are an amateur player as compared to a professional chess player. And why I'm saying this is because there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of books. Of course, Chessable is around. There's a lot of courses out there. And this overload of information can get distracting because if you're a student, you have schoolwork, right? You don't do 6 hours a day like a professional chess player. If you're an adult, you have work, you have family. So I think choosing a practical opening repertoire for your tournament practice is really important. And it saves you time from studying openings, and you can focus your attention more on other stuff like calculation, which I think is really important. So I just want to give a quick example. In this game that was played in, I shouldn't try to be so clever with this display settings. Can't quite see. Let me do this. Sorry about this. Okay.
Sorry, what was SCF?
I'm sorry?
What was SCF?
Oh, Singapore Chess Federation.
Ah.
Yeah. the Singapore Chess Federation.
Singapore. Okay.
Yeah, so I now worked on trying to develop chess and grow the game. Yeah. Also got a bit tired of corporate life and wanted to do something different. Yeah, so this game was played in round 2, and I was paired with a young, talented player from Canada. He's 14. And okay, I've checked his games, and he has a pretty narrow repertoire, so I expected the Petrov defense. And thankfully for the Olympiad, I prepared a new weapon against, it was against somebody at the Olympiad, but I didn't get to use it. So I thought it would make good sense to play it and use it as a surprise. And here's how the game continued. So normally I play knight takes e5 here. And I was pretty sure that he'll be very prepared in this variation, and I didn't want to, walk into something that, that he will know a lot about. So I played something that I never played before. It's just a move. It doesn't refute the Petrov. Nothing refutes the Petrov, obviously. So my opponent played knight takes e4. I played d takes e5, which is kind of different from the usual theory, and the lines can become really sharp. So now the main line and the most solid move is d5 and knight bd2. And Fabiano Caruana played queen d7. That's a very strange move in 2018 against Nikita Vichugov. So I know of this game, but I had something prepared there as well. So white goes bishop d3, black goes knight c5, and then white goes bishop e2, and the game goes on. But I looked at my opponent's games and I noticed that he plays in a very principled and sharp style. So I was expecting him to play bishop c5, which is, I think, theoretically speaking, if you look at all the books in the Petrov, they will say that this bishop c5 move is the best, and it leads to a draw by best play. So I kind of expected it, even though he had no games in this variation. So I checked this line really deeply in the morning. Yeah, I was quite happy to see this over the board, of course. So I went bishop c4. And now there's this tactic with knight takes f2, which seems to be just winning material on the spot, right? But this line is well known, and there's a lot of fireworks that will come soon. So he played knight takes f2. And the point of this variation is that white goes bishop takes f7, king takes f7, queen d5 check, king g6, queen takes c5, and knight takes h1. So currently, white is a whole rook down, but black's king is way out in the open. And for most of you, probably, you might not have seen this. Anyone has seen this before in your life? Yeah, neither have I, like before that, before I prepared this. So this looks completely bizarre because white is a rook down. It's not so clear. I would need time to capture the knight, and black can use that time to escape with the king and maybe consolidate his position. Now, when I check the recent theory, the books and the causes, it says that this is just a draw. But when I look at this position with my, with the human eye, it just looks almost completely lost for black if I can coordinate my pieces in time, right? So I play knight to c3. And here I understood that my opponent has forgotten his theory because he was spending so much time. And I already was quite sure he's never going to navigate his way out. And this is what I wanted to say, that you could take the best book written by whoever and use their approach, but you have to look at it with your own eyes and be confident that even without, let's say, preparation in the morning, could you remember these lines? So my opponent, to his credit, remembered the move h6. This, okay, it's not really rocket science. You want to run with the king, right? So, and then I played queen c4. And when I prepared for the game, I was also thinking in my mind, okay, what if I forget some stuff and I'm a rook down? And then I realized that the position is really easy to play. My next move is knight to d5. And if his king runs to h7, I have this idea of knight f6 check. So that's basically what I have in mind, and that's it. Like, that's the end of my preparation. But for black, he has to worry over so many things, right? Like when the knight lands on d5, there's a c7 pawn hanging. You might lose the rook on the a8. You might land the knight on h1 will be lost. So for black, there's so many things to worry about. It just doesn't make much sense to play this unless you are Vidit Gujarati, who plays this for a living and makes a draw every time. But if you're not Vidit and you can't remember stuff, yeah, best advice to avoid this. So. Yeah.
Do you have USB? Sorry to
No.
USB-C?
USB-C, I think so, yeah.
Okay, then you can actually move here, so then it's more comfortable for you. You can even touch the screen.
Oh,
This connection here.
okay.
So then you don't have to be like there.
Okay, sure. Yes, here.
Connection there. Okay, we need to
The USB-C port, right?
Yeah, and when you say quickly take this out. Try to go.
The position's gone.
So then you can be in front of the screen and do this.
Oh, that's what you meant. Okay.
Yeah, and then you
I
just
still
move.
got to move this, yeah?
Yeah, just move here.
Okay, so now I just block everyone. That's it.
And then here is touch.
Yeah, but I still need to move the pieces though.
Here you can move the pieces. This is possible to move like touch.
Oh,
So then it's better.
yeah. Too old for this. So, yeah, so in this position, black hurriedly runs to h7. And then as advertised, knight to d5. So I was already very comfortable. I just felt there was no way that black would know what to do. And the only move in the position, or rather the main line, if you look at the database and also the books, the only move is rook to e8. Not rook f8, not rook g8, but rook to e8. And at first sight, it's just not so easy to understand why, right? There are a couple of other lines that goes something like this, knight to c6. And we go queen e4 check, king g8, bishop e3, d6, e6, oops, sorry. Yeah, some weird stuff like this.
One question, knight d6, knight f6, no?
Oh yeah, there's knight f6 right away. So I think maybe d6 first, or also knight f6. Yeah, I think the line that I was trying to show, probably knight c6 at this point, is the main point. Yeah, knight c6 is also a move, but it looks pretty insane, right? Like, because the king is out in the open. And apparently black survives there as well. So he played king h7, I went knight d5. So the only move is rook e8, and here I sort of remembered my files had bishop takes h6, and that's it. That's all I remembered. And I wanted to just blitz it out and then go for a stroll, and and try not to panic, and hope that I could work out the complications. But in many cases, in any sense, this position suits my style because I'm an aggressive player. I'm quite direct in my game, so this line suits my style. I like to play the initiative, like everyone else, I guess. So, and then it was at this point when my opponent was thinking that I suddenly realized that black could play rook f8, which I didn't analyze in the morning. And like, true to, as predicted, he really played rook f8. So it's a very natural move. Very natural move. And also during the game, I felt, why not? But in fact, this move is just losing on the spot. Maybe you guys can have a shot, but how you guys would proceed? It takes a bit of calculation, though. Yeah, queen e4 and say king h8.
Knight h4.
Yeah, it was one of the lines that I calculated, knight h4. And then I think I was worried about queen e8
Or you could play bishop h6.
and gh.
Knight f6. Queen g6.
Queen g6, and just finish, yeah? Yeah, well done. That was how the game continued. So, yeah. So I played queen e4. And my main concern was really the move g6. And initially I thought I could play, for example, knight h4, but he plays queen to e8 and just defends with all his life. And I wasn't sure how to proceed after this. But okay, in the end I found something, so it was quite nice. I'll tell you guys what he said after the game, but later, after we analyze this. Queen,
Queen e3.
say g5.
Queen
Queen e4 check.
yeah.
King g7. That looks winning. Looks winning, right? So, which position? Here, knight f4.
Knight c7. Knight c7.
Knight c7.
Knight to queen.
So, sorry, queen e3.
Oh no.
This?
Knight c7 now.
Knight c7 here, yeah?
Knight to queen.
And if,
Red, bishop takes c6.
whoa,
Something better.
yeah, that's ferocious play. I didn't think about this, but it looks possible, yeah? Any other ideas? Knight f6, he takes. Rook takes f6. And queen h4. Looks very strong. Yeah, that's a nice idea. I didn't see it during the game. Okay, so if g5, you play knight takes g5, king g7. After queen h4, g5, knight g5, king g7. Oh, you go bishop g5. Yeah, it's just crushing, right? You know, I think in practice, this probably will also work because I couldn't work out the defense. Probably there is a defense because there's only one way for white to win this position. And the move is, yeah, like you said, queen e3 and g5. And here just, yeah, but here this is the moment where you just throw everybody with just this. Just bishop d2. With the idea of putting the bishop on c3, you give a check, you play long castle, and just casually wins. There's just no defense. So when I saw this line over the board, I was, okay, I have to try this. Play casually bishop d2, in the middle of a raging attack with a rook down, and then win. So apparently this wins. But, okay, like the gentleman said, he played king h8, I took the pawn, he took, I played queen, yeah, queen to g6, and there's just no defense. I'm going to play long castle, and I play knight f6. It's just no defense. So he played queen e8, I took the pawn, he played here, played long castle. He went knight f2, so I wanted to put all my knights into the king side. What exactly did he do here? Yeah, he played this. And here I actually missed a simple mate in 4. Rook takes f6. Queen h7, yeah. King h8, queen h8, and then queen takes f6 is checkmate. Yeah, I didn't. I wanted to do this instead, to sort of just put my pieces into his camp. And I thought this was winning. Obviously, he's still winning. He played rook takes f6, I played knight h7, and queen takes f6 is mate. So, yeah, and the game ended. So after the game, I asked him, why do you choose this? When did you last check this variation? And he said 6 months ago. So I told him that this is just not the way. In such a sharp variation, if you didn't check the line really thoroughly, you shouldn't play it. And especially if you're surprised in a tournament game, you should just change something, something that's more solid, and you know you can play a longer game. Yeah. So that's a very typical mistake. He's a very young player, so I think that's why he doesn't have the experience yet. But I just told him that, you know, you should have a backup line against d takes e5, because here you could, there are many variations here that you can try. For example, e takes d4 is also quite good. For example, you can do this. So something like this, this. And white is a little bit better, but you can play this position. Yeah, so rather interestingly, I made the same mistake myself in the very next round against current Gregorian. So I had this idea of playing a recently trendy line, which I've never played before, and I just prepared it for this one game. And this is just not the way to prepare, because you can have all these files and PGNs and the causes, but if you have never played it in training games or you have not really looked at it thoroughly, you just can't expect to play out the position and expect to understand it.
I did that yesterday.
Yeah,
Horrible game.
it always happens because your opponent more likely than not will not walk into the main line in your files, right? None of you ever get that. I never get the main line in my files in the actual game, hardly ever. So my opponent was surprised, but he just played something and I didn't figure out the difference, and I'll just show the game right now. So that's my mouse.
And according to the computer, after rook e8, black is lost. Right? On your game. After rook e8.
No, it's a draw. It's a draw everywhere.
No, after rook f8.
The rook f8 is lost, yes. Rook f8 is lost. Every move is lost except for rook e8. So why would anybody play something like that, right? Because I would like to think that chess is a game that is not purely dependent on memory. Sorry, I'm just struggling with this a little bit. I shouldn't try to be so clever with this. Yeah? Okay, let me just do this. Okay, let me just close. Sorry about this. I can't bring it to my other screen. Oh, okay, here we go. So, yeah, here we go. So in this game, I prepared this variation. E6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, d5, takes, bishop g5. Yeah, I would like to think that if you are getting on in life, I would strongly recommend that we study this Carlsberg structure and just sits there and plays based on understanding and not enter any sharp variations like the one I just tried, which is bishop b4. This is kind of trendy. It has been played by the Indian players especially. Because with c6 and the Carlsberg, it has been played for hundreds of years, literally. And there's no new theory and there's no refutation of it. You can always play it and you can always get a good position, right? And okay, the main idea of this variation is that after e3, oh, wait, okay, I understand. Wait, what's going on? This is why we don't use chess base. It just hung. Sorry about this. Let me just do this. And then we do this. Okay. Yeah, so bishop b4. And the idea of this, this variation is that after e3,
After the dialog box, so thing on the bottom left in your laptop, bottom left corner, is that dialog box from Chessbase asking you to do something?
oh, I think so. Oh, maybe that's why, yeah, it's hanging. Yeah. So I've got to cancel this probably. Okay, I'm going to do this. Okay, okay, we're in business. See, I'm not a professional. So h6. So the point of this variation is to go super sharp. And we get this kind of, definitely is a non-standard Queen's Gambit decline. And yeah, the line goes something like this. So for example, after Queen to c2, go h5 with the obvious threat of trapping the bishop. He goes f3, he takes. And here there are a few ways to play. There's queen d6, there's queen e7, there's knight c6. So there are a few ideas here. And my opponent just casually played rook c1. So I focused most of my time on knight ge2 and queen c2, but I didn't check rook c1. And there was some specifics that I had to be careful about, and I couldn't work it out during the game. I spent like half an hour after h5. Here he played queen a4 check. I went knight c6 and f3. So already here I was in not really in the pleasant state, because it's not in the main line of my variation or the top 2 or 3 variations. He just changed something in the first 10 moves. And I have to make a decision. Do I capture on c3 first or not? Do I play bishop c3, bc3, and then knight takes g3? Or do I capture on g3 and keep the c file open? So already this decision took me quite a long time, because I was afraid that if I play bishop c3 here, bc3, and later on white could play c4 and open up the queen side, because I have hopes of castling on the queen side and then crushing him on the king side, right? But in real life, it never happens. So yeah, what do you guys think? Will you take on g3 first, or will you take on c3?
Take on g3 and bishop d6 or something?
No, so knight g3 and then bishop d6. And say king f2?
Bishop d7.
Queen b3. And d5 and b7 are hanging. I calculated the line actually. So this, yeah,
Knight takes g3, h3, bishop e6,
bishop e6
bishop e6, yeah.
here, yeah? And bishop b5?
Bishop b5.
Queen d6 there. After that.
I think it's safer taking c3.
Sorry. So, come again?
I think it's safer take on a c3 with the bishop and then take off the bishop.
And why do you think so?
Well, I think it's safer to close the c file because the threats on the c6 and the knight is also pressurizing d5. Just looks a bit safer.
Okay, interesting. Anyone agrees or disagrees? What do you were saying something?
Yeah, I mean, I still think like you can take on g3, then go queen d6 in the last variation. So knight g3, hg3, bishop e6,
Bishop b5?
then queen d6, pressure on g3.
So bishop c6 check, and you take with the pawn, right? And then king f2. Interesting.
Not play like takes and queen e6 immediately, maybe?
Or knight takes g3 and queen d6 right away, you're saying, yeah?
And after king f2 h4, I think maybe it's good to move.
Ah, I see. h4. And probably capture,
Yeah,
G.
pawn takes.
and knight e2. Knight g e2.
Yes.
And the knight comes to f4.
Yes, that.
I also considered that variation because it feels so nice, right? So the few things that, some of you pointed out, whenever I go for h4, when the pawn is on g3, and g takes h4, g takes h4, it opens up this square for the knight, which is really important for the position. If white lands a knight on f4, the game is instantly over because there's no more counterplay on the king side. d5 pawn is chronically weak in that sense because my knight is on c6. I couldn't play my Carlsberg. I should have played Carlsberg on move 4, right? Right? So put my knight on c6 instead. So that's the one important thing. If this pawn is gone, the knight lands on f4, it becomes critical for black. I'm sorry? Sorry, come again? This is not giving me a break. h4 here, you mean? What do you mean again? In this position, what do you play? h4 here, right? Oh no, but I will not play bishop h4, I think. You could take on e4, or you could play bishop e5. Bishop e5, f6, and then f takes e4. Yeah, so this move is also good, yeah. I'm terrified of this screen. So, so I played knight takes g3, which was a mistake. So if you guys watch the commentary by Zidler and Gustafsson, the correct move was to play bishop takes c3. So well done. And the point is, after takes, so initially I was afraid that after this position, that eventually white will play c4 and opens up the game. But concretely, it just doesn't happen. Here I could play bishop d7. Now there's no c4 because of all these tricks with the knight. He has to go queen to b3. I went long castle. And here, just play b6. So this was the position that, I saw b6 and I wasn't sure. I didn't want to make a move like this. But actually black is just fine. And my next move would be h4. And then we go on with the attack.
What about a4 for white?
Bishop d3 first.
Here, bishop d3?
No, bishop d3.
Here, right? Okay, maybe here you can go f5, sorry. Go f5 with idea to play f4. Knight a5?
Yeah.
Well, we are not in a rush for that because now the queen is not really doing much on b3. So we can keep the knight on c6 for the time being. But I think we could play something even like this. Maybe some pressure on e3, followed by f5. So let's say he goes here. I could already do this and play queen to e6 and attack the pawn. So if he comes at me on the queen side, at least I have something going on as counterplay. Yeah. So this would have been correct.
Bishop d3 is a4 then?
Instead of bishop d3, a4 here, right?
Yeah.
I guess you can, but let's say I play a quiet move like this. Even if you play a5, if you capture, I can recapture with the c pawn. And then I play rook c8, rook c7, and pressure on your c3 pawn.
I was thinking going c4 there, but...
c4 now knight a5.
No, yeah, I mean those variations. Just mentioned go rook c8, go c4, and try and fight for c4. I think you're right.
I see. Yeah, so there are resources for black in this position that I failed to assess correctly. I took. And then here I made another strange decision. Instead of queen d6, which would have been strongest, I played queen e7, which is just really strange. I couldn't explain it myself. I think I just remembered this move in another line that's similar to this position, where queen e7 was correct. So again, when you can't explain the moves, it's just so difficult to remember. Yeah. I played queen e7. He went king f2. Now I have no choice but to capture on c3, rook takes c3, and I play rook h6. Yeah, I badly wanted to play this move because it just looks nice. I can defend the knight this way, right? But in fact, black's position is already really difficult if white finds the best move here, which he found quite easily. Could you guys try?
Queen b3.
It's too easy, too easy. Yeah, queen b3, really strong move. And the point is not just to attack the pawn, but to just keep this bishop on c8. And there is also a tactical sequence to that. I played queen d6. And what does white do here?
Bishop e5,
Bishop e5, and if bishop d7?
knight e2.
Okay, I play long castle.
Yeah, it's good position.
It's not so bad, yeah?
You play rook c5.
Precisely. What are you doing here? You should be here. Right. So bishop d7, rook c5. And I just lose the pawn. So interestingly, he didn't even see this. Like he didn't find bishop e5. So in this position, I spent something like 20 minutes to get to this point, wondering what to do after bishop e5, and I was about to play king f8 here. And after bishop c6, b takes c6 is just a horrible position, and just no counterplay, and probably it's just strategically lost because of my bad pawns everywhere. And he said he didn't even consider bishop e5 because it blocks the queen from the b7 pawn, and it's a strange square. He didn't bother to calculate anything. So he just played bishop d3. I was very happy to play knight e7 followed by c6, which I should have done on move 4. So play the Carlsberg is good, you know. Don't do this crap. Well, okay, and then the game went on. Actually, the game was quite exciting, but because I burned so much time, eventually I lost the game. But it was a really nice, it was a nice fight. So after the game, I asked him, about the opening, and he just said, I didn't analyze this at all, but I just played something logical. So he said that in the Nimzo Indian, so for example here, so let's say knight c3, bishop b4, queen c2, d5, takes. So it actually transposes to something that's very similar. So he says that in this position, the queen is on c2. If it goes queen a4 check, you lose one move. So, okay, I will not play queen c2, I'll play rook c1 so that I can play queen a4 check at one go. When somebody talks to you and explains to you like that, you just feel like you're a complete beginner. Like, I feel like, okay, I could have learned this and I was 10. And he says, okay, rook c1 is very logical because I want to play queen a4 check in one go. I played queen b3 to stop your bishop from moving out from c8. I played bishop d3 because I didn't want to block the queen. So he was just explaining in very, very rudimentary level, but it worked very well for him because he played so fast and I was down on time and confidence. Yeah, so eventually I lost this game. And then in yesterday's game, it also didn't turn out so well. So I thought I would just share this with you guys. So generally, I know everybody shares their winning games. I'll be the only one that shares the ones that I lost, okay? So this was against a young Indian talent. So I had the white pieces. So back in 2017, 2018, I used to study the Italian as white really deeply. So I like to think of it as one of my my best openings. But the problem with this variation is that there are a lot of subtleties with many different move orders, many different variations that you need to know move by move. And now that I'm not really studying chess full time, it became a real problem for me over the board. And I'll just explain why.
When you study an opening, do you remember it for a long time, or do you have to keep refreshing it in your mind all the time?
I think that if you are younger, I'm sorry, I have to say this. When you are younger, the memory retention is just so much better.
Yeah,
So you don't even have to look at it and you can still remember, yeah. But because I'm not really at my peak in terms of age, in my late 30s, almost as young as you, yeah. So, so such a repertoire could be really taxing on the mind, yeah. Especially when you prepare before the game and you have never really checked the lines before that, yeah. So I thought I understood the positions really well, but then today I just realized I misassessed the whole position completely. So I'll just go straight to the topical position, which starts with this. And if you look at the interviews of, say, Anish Giri or Wesley or MVL, they always say that nobody understands the Italian because of the many different move orders. But it's fine because nobody understands, so it's okay. Nobody understands anyway, so they just play chess. And they are right. So there are many ways for black to play this position. For example, black can go knight to e7 to g6, classic regrouping, followed by c6 to d5, challenging in the center. There's also the idea of playing rook to e8, followed by bishop to e6, exchanging the bishops, and not damaging the pawn structure. It's a very solid approach. Or you could play like what my opponent did, which was to play bishop e6 right away, and after capture, to recapture with the pawn. So you get these doubled pawns on the, in the center. In exchange, you get an f-file, and you could try to hack at the king side. So knight h5, knight f4, and do some stuff. So I kind of expected that my opponent will play ambitiously with bishop e6. Now, in the long term, this is strategically very risky, because in every endgame, white is just better. So it's banking on a king side attack. And you need to know how to defend against these typical maneuvers to defend against the attacks, which I understood, but there was some concrete move by move stuff that I had to know. So here he played bishop e6. Is it my move? Ah, it's my move. Sorry. Bishop e6, capture, capture. So now black's ideas are quite easy. He will play knight h5, knight f4, the knight comes to e7 to g6, the queen comes to e8 to h5 maybe. So all this stuff. So I had to be sure what I was walking into. I played bishop e3.
Sorry?
Capture.
Sorry, I have a question. Like,
Sure.
these positions with bishop e6, there's always like queen b3, and I think it's usually not that good to play queen b3 because queen c8 or something.
Just queen d7.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's queen c8 and it's still good for black for some reason. I don't think.
Yeah. So normally queen b3, this double attack seldom works. It's very tempting to play this.
I know it's often
Yeah.
it's bad for some reason, but I don't quite
Yeah.
understand why. It's like queen c8 sometimes.
The main reason is you can never take on b7. Like after you click around for a few times, you'll understand why. Like you can never capture on b7.
Here, I understand, but like in some positions, I think you can sometimes. If they play queen b7 or no.
Well, normally you can't because the queen just gets trapped. Because rook f8, it never works. Normally you play queen b3 not to capture the pawn for some other reason, but the queen on b3 is not well placed because you want to support d3 to d4.
Because like I just checked some games where the engine suggested queen c8 after queen b3, and I was just wondering why that's not good for white because the queen on c8 would be better. But
Yeah,
usually queen b7 just works.
I think it's really because the queen on b3, it blocks your ideas of playing b4 to b5, first of all. You want the pawn to be on b4 to support your queen side expansion. And then secondly, the queen is not supporting d3 to d4. Yeah, so the queen is not well placed on b3 generally. And it's also away from the king side. So there are some blitz games where I just forgot about it and he captures on f3. Rook takes f3, gf, and then I just die. So here, okay, this bishop is targeting my f2 pawn, so I'm having none of it. Let's change it. And here he played queen e8. So typical idea, I went knight bd2. So here I was feeling very confident, you know, I was going to show this guy my experience in the Italian, you know, the grandmaster, right? So, and then, okay, he was, okay, he went into a long think, and he played knight h5. So it became easy when I went back to check my notes, and the move here is b4 and not d4. when d4 is probably the most logical move in the position. I don't know, what do you guys think? It is, right? I should have set a trap and asked. Yeah, but d4 is definitely the most logical move because it targets the doubled pawns and maybe d5 ideas and so on, right? But actually b4 is strongest. Expansion on the queen side is more dangerous. And these things takes experience. It's impossible to explain in like 5 minutes. Yeah, if you see enough games, you understand that b4, b5 is just much better. And I just forgot. But it's still fine. I think white is still better after d4. And then here I made, he played knight to f4. Okay, so he's going to come at me on the king side. What will you guys do to defend this?
Is g3 possible?
King h2, yeah? Followed by g3? And but you're saying?
If g3 is possible, then I will play g3.
Just play g3, right? Knight takes h3.
King g2.
Yeah, just g3. So it's very easy to forget that there's this idea of playing g3, and I can't take on h3. King g2 and the knight is trapped.
Oh yeah.
Queen h5, queen h1. But your mind is telling you that you have to defend the h3 pawn first, and it just doesn't come to you. The only issue is that I actually know of this motif. It's a very common motif in the Italian, that you can play g3, allowing knight takes h3, and the knight is trapped. I just forgot about it, and that's because I haven't been looking. So another thing that, if you play such strategically complex lines, you just need to be very up to date, and you need to keep revising, or else you will just forget. So even for me, I forgot completely. It was only when I was walking back to my room, and then I just thought of it. Yeah.
If black had played d takes e takes d4, would you have captured with the pawn or the knight?
Probably the pawn.
Oh, yeah, and then if black plays e5 now, no?
And then I would play maybe knight f1. And then I have...
And does it not help black that he's got rid of his double pawns? It's improved the structure.
Yes.
Is it not okay then?
It is probably okay for black, which is why b4 is objectively stronger.
Yeah.
But I still think white should be a bit better because I have maybe the c file, and I have plans of playing f4 in the near future. So what the gentleman was suggesting was something like this.
Yeah.
I'll go knight f1. So for example, takes. That's for argument's sake, this structure. I was hoping that I could play f4 eventually.
Yeah, well, I was thinking to maintain the pawn on e5.
Ah, yes, okay.
d4 at all.
So don't take on d4, yeah? So say knight f4.
Kind of like a Lopez kind of structure.
Yeah, I guess then I'll go rook to c1. And I will still have a bit of pressure, I think. Yeah. And also some ideas with... Now maybe I take the b7 pawn. For you, okay? Yeah, maybe I can go for this pawn now. He probably has to go king h8, and I go rook c1, threatening d5. So still quite a complicated position. Yeah. And now, so what I vaguely remember in my notes is that there is this idea of queen to f1, defending h3 to play g3. So I was very excited to play it, but it's from a completely different position. So the position comes from, So after knight h5, it was in this position that you go queen f1. Yeah. And now knight f4, g3. It looks almost the same, right? But obviously, in this position, if I could play g3, of course you just play g3, you just save so much time. And this is a key line actually, queen h5 to f queen h1, this pin. It's really important. So I was very proud of myself to find to play this queen f1 move. And then he played the queen h5, stopping g3. So I went king h2. And this is also the time when I realized that my inactivity is clearly showing. Because here I spend a lot of time calculating g5. when it's just a rubbish move, I could play knight takes g5. I just completely missed. I was like, okay, am I going to get mated after g4? But I could just take. I forgot about it. So spending unnecessary time there. Yeah, so eventually, okay, so he played knight to g6, I went g3. So I took all this time to play g3 and king g2 when I could have done it in 2 moves. If you,
Knight g6, can you go rook f6 and then rook g6?
so here,
Yeah.
and if g3, g3? Yeah, it's the same, yeah. Yeah, it's similar. Similar to what he did. But the main thing is, yeah, I wasted 2 moves. I played queen to f1 and king h2 to g2. When I could have just played g3, king g2 in like
But
instantly.
what's the point of playing knight f4 if you have to go back after g3? Is it that move or?
No, there's no real point to it. So
What's the bad move there?
it's just that he has to find a square for his piece, and he couldn't come up with anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe now queen f1 is interesting because you can go with
Queen
queen
d-
d4.
Yeah, I was also thinking along those lines. Yeah, in the end I didn't. I played queen d3 instead, which fell to something else. But okay, anyways, the game continued like this. I went queen to d3. And here I was just, I was so sure that this position is better for white, because optically, I don't know how you guys feel, but if I feel like white should be better, because I thought the knight is being controlled by my pawn, the queen is not really doing anything. The only thing that looks good for black are the double rooks, which I plan to neutralize with rook f1, and then I'll start stuff on the queen side. But this position is just equal, according to the engine, just brutally 0, 0, 0. So I don't really understand anything. And what my opponent did was quite good. He played e5. I went d5. And initially I thought that he was going to play knight to d4, after which I would have played rook f1, knight takes f3, and knight takes f3. And I still thought that these pieces are well dressed up, but nowhere to go. But in fact, again, the engine just says black is fine. Zeros. But my opponent did something interesting. He played knight to b4. So this was, it took me by surprise. His idea, after queen to b3, is to play a5, and eventually plays the knight to a6 to c5, and to set up a complete blockade. Yeah, this was quite well, like, it's quite a nice plan. And yeah, I started to panic here. I was like, okay, if the position is so blocked, then there's not much. If the knight ever reaches on c5, and this knight, let's say, lands on f8 to d7, suddenly his pieces all make sense, and I would have no real breakthrough. So what I did was, yeah, I very creatively, yeah, stopped his knight from returning to a6. Oops, it's a free piece. And then he just played rook a8, like, easy. Like, brutally forcing knight to a6. And then the knight comes to c5, and I have nothing. Then here, yeah, so here he played really well. Knight to f8, he wants to hop to d7, then have another knight to c5. So here I play rook c3, allowing knight a2, fork. Like beginner style, right? It was actually intentional. I was hoping that after knight to a2, I will capture on c7, knight takes c1, rook takes c1, and I hope that these 2 pawns will give me enough compensation for the exchange. And I thought that this is winning for white. It's just nonsense. According to the engines, black's better. So I've already lost complete objectivity, because throughout the game, I just felt white was better, which was not the case. If I had known that the position was equal, I wouldn't have done stuff like this, because it doesn't justify this action at all. It's just nonsense. But my opponent took the bite. He didn't.
But lost, like, computer, what says? How many points for black?
Like 0.3 or 0.4.
Nah, it's not lost then.
It's not lost, it's better for black. Yeah. But I feel that I will have some practical chances anyways. Yeah, so I would still have preferred him to play knight a2. But he just says, no, I'm not playing. I'm not going for any of this. Oh no, he played rook a7. Yeah, that's defense c7. So you see how solid my opponent was playing. I had no chances to do anything. So he realized that all his pieces are bad on the queen side. So look at how methodical he was. Move the rook away, move the knight away, move the rook away, queen's going back. Because he realized that nothing's happening on the king side. It's just brutal. And then I just took. Yeah, I just was like, no, I'm not allowing this crap blockade on c5. I'm not having any of it, I take the knight. Just completely losing objectivity. So don't do that. Like, it's not advised. Here, just play b3, and probably the right result is a draw. He'll put the knight on c5. I'll put my rooks here. In fact, white could still do something. For example, queen to e3 is an idea. And say knight here. Then I could try g4. And then the knight comes to h4. I could jump to f5. And there is still something going on in the game, even though the position is probably still equal. Yeah, this is what I should have done. But I think we were at we were not at move 40 yet. Like still way before move 40. So I got a bit anxious to make things happen, which was, yeah, an amateurish thing to do. Yeah, there was no need for that. So instead of accepting that this position is probably equal and a draw, I decided to try to lose instead. I took the knight, took queen b5, and here, yeah, so this is when you start to realize things are running out of control because you just miss tactics everywhere. Queen takes b4, knight c5, threatening a4, and knight d3. Just so bad. I went rook to c6, and then he just played knight b8, just forced my rook. Okay, so finally he gets his knight on c5. And here, even here, I was still feeling optimistic that one day I'm going to play b4, I'm going to force his knight away. And then I will create a pass pawn on the a file. And I will show my knights are so good in a close position. And then I realized that he was going to play b5. So my hopes of a pawn queening is gone, like instantly. And it was at this point that I realized that I need to start playing for a draw. But it was already too late. Like he gave me no chances. After like from here on, I went b3. So even in this point, he was very careful. So what do you think I was going to do after b5? Rook c5, right? Yeah, the next best thing after sac exchange is sac 2. So you take on c5. d5, queen takes c5, you take the pawn on the b5, and then you put the knight on c4. Even if you lose, it's fine, you know, like, it's great. But he didn't allow it, of course. He just calmly develops. So I think he also played very maturely. For a young player, he was very, you know, careful in his play. Just h6, improving his position slightly, and waiting for me to make mistakes. Yeah, so this position, I can't play b4 because of knight takes a4, and I don't have anything else to do. I think the best chance for me is to go knight h4 again, to go to f5, and then to play g4, knight f3, g5, and just hope for the best. I played queen c2. He went here. I went back. He pushed. Yeah, I want to show the final stages of the game because it was a really nice finish. I want to give you guys a chance to see what he did. So again in this position, will you take the pawn right away? Queen takes b4, it's hanging.
f5 first.
Say knight f5, rook f7. I'm, so, I'm, I'm sorry? Rook h4? Or rook a4? But why not just queen takes b4 though, if it's working? You don't know. Rook. So rook b1, let's say I move my queen. Say queen a4, something, yeah. So maybe knight to f5 first, and hopes that he plays knight rook f7 and I can play knight takes d6. Yeah, so this was like just out of pure desperation that I got to find tricks like this. So again, he just improves his rook to a very good square. He just plays rook a2, just don't take the pawn. It's an excellent move.
Yeah, you cannot move the queen.
Yeah, I cannot move anything. Like this, almost in zugzwang, you know. And I was like, okay, I'm not letting you take my pawn. He played rook f7. So now knight f5 makes no sense because now there are more tricks with knight takes d5, which is just another miserable point to the position. I went knight f3. Okay, and here he played knight to c4. I went queen d3. Okay, what will you guys do with black? Dinner on the house, if you can, find this.
Rook d2?
I'm sorry?
Rook d2, and knight takes knight.
Oh, but my queen, yeah.
Rook takes f3,
And if knight f3,
queen b6,
and rook f1,
knight e3.
yeah. Well done. Rook takes f3, knight f3, and very nice move, queen to b6. Just fantastic tactical resource. I have no reasonable way to defend the pawn. So the guy has an extra exchange. He refuses to take the pawn. He gives it back, and then he just finds this. Yeah, and this position is lost. There's no way to defend the pawn. So you could run with the king, but for example, let's say this, it doesn't work. You just capture here, and you just get mated in 5 different ways. And this was how yesterday's game ended. Yeah, so yeah, I think the moral of today's lecture is really in terms of opening preparation. If you're an amateur player, you don't really have a lot of time to look at chess. Choose something that is that can be easily maintained, and there are a few recommendations you could have this conversation at breakfast if you see me. Yeah, but just be mindful that if you want to play complex lines, whether it's strategical or tactical, you just need to know them really well, or you run the risk into getting into something like this where you just completely misunderstand everything. And this coming from a grandmaster, So. And lastly, when you play someone, when you play a GM, yeah, just have a go at them. You have every shot, Don't be afraid of these guys. Not that good.
Time for a quick question.
Yeah,
You
fast.
mentioned a lot in this game about staying objective and losing objectivity. Have you got practical advice for amateurs about how to refocus and stay objective?
Yeah, I think these things is very easy to say. Your coach will tell you, treat this position as a new position, forget about what happened before. But it's easy to say, but not so easy to practice. And I think this just comes with experience. Yeah, there are a lot of players who are able to do that very well, that they don't go on tilt so easily. It just comes, unfortunately, it comes with experience and having a healthy mindset. If you keep reminding yourself, I'm not going to say anything that's very useful because you probably know about it, but yeah, it just comes a lot with experience. Because myself, it happens to me a lot of times. Also in tournaments, when I start badly, it would always be very difficult for me to get back on track. Yeah, but there are some players that are just brilliant at coming back. For example, Magnus, there are some tournaments in the early, I think in the mid, say 2015, 2016, he was always losing in the first round and he comes back to win the tournament. That's elite mindset. So you can look at their results and try to get inspired from that.
I often find if I do a lot of work on my chess, my results suffer. You know, and it always happens. If I don't study chess for a while, my results go very well. And if I start putting a lot of work in,
Oh,
the results get worse for some reason. And it always happens, always.
well, I don't know, maybe it could be because of the work that you put in, it gives you a bit of pressure in that sense. Maybe because like I spent all this time, I should be rewarded for this time. I don't know, I'm just guessing. Because it feels like if you are putting the work, you should get something in return, but it never happens like that.
Yeah, it seems when I put the work in, I have more to think about on every move than if I haven't put the work in, I don't know what I'm, you know what I mean? If I just play naturally, I seem to play better than trying to use stuff that I've learned, you know what I mean?
Yeah, actually, as I progress as a chess player, I just feel the more I know, the more actually I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually like this.
Yeah.
And then in the sense, it gives you more doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, but overall, I would still say that when you put in the work, your results should improve in the long run. Like that's normally how it works.
Older, it gets more difficult.
That's also true because you have other things to worry about, right? Yeah, you need to worry about your finances. Probably not for any of you since you are here. But you have family to look after, grandchildren probably. Yeah, and yeah, children to look after. So at the end of the day, chess is just a game, you know. You just enjoy it, and then you play a GM, have a go at them. Yeah, that's the most important, you know. Yeah. So any final questions you might have?
Maybe you said you lost objectivity by thinking you were better in the position, but in the first game you didn't trust your opponent's preparation, and so how do you try not to lose objectivity by thinking you are worse because your opponent prepared that line? I don't know what to ask you.
Okay, let me try to rephrase your question. Are you saying that in the first game in the Petrov, that I felt that my opponent didn't prepare the line well, and that I might lose objectivity? Is that your question?
Yes. How do you try to force you to not lose the objectivity in thinking you're lost in the position? How do you know your opponent didn't prepare the line?
Well, let me try to answer that in a way that makes sense. So that first game against the young boy, I was already feeling very confident because the position was what I had, and I had that position. I was very confident of it. And I knew that rook f8 move was wrong. I just had to work it out. So in that sense, I was very confident that the position should be good for me. I just need to find a way. If I can't find a way, it just means I'm not good enough and I don't deserve to win the game. Right? Whereas for that last game, I just completely didn't, I just misassessed the position and I wasn't good enough to evaluate it correctly. So, and then that led to the downward spiral where I went for that exchange sacrifice and just lost the game in a foolish way. Yeah.
I have another question.
Hmm.
How did you manage to become grandmaster and still playing chess and have your career at work? And
Yeah, I'm surprised that someone as young as you is asking me. So I think a lot boils down to motivation. So I was tremendously motivated and I spent a lot of hours in my spare time. So sometimes on weekends, I can spend up to 8 hours a day. On weekdays, I'm exhausted. So whatever time I have, I just use on chess. But on weekends, I had a strategy. So first of all, I played lots of training games so that I don't use the tournaments as a warm-up event, which some of you might do. It's actually not a good idea. Play as many training games as possible in a competitive setting. Make some bets with your friends. Whatever, if you lose, you got to run around, I don't know. 10 kilometers or something.
Do you think a lot of blitz is bad for your game?
I think blitz is good for opening training. Yeah. In general, when your blitz rating improves, it shows that your openings are better because you just play faster in the opening.
I find it can make you careless though sometimes.
Mm.
When you play a serious game, you're still
In the blitz mode?
in a blitz mode.
Yeah.
You're kind of making superficial moves.
So yeah, I would recommend that for your training games to use, okay, don't play 90 plus 30 because it's just too long for a training game. You could play something like 45 plus 15 or 60 plus 30. So at least it's shorter. You can cram a few more games in that one day. And it's still not that long and not that intense. And maybe towards the tournament, you can increase that time control to 90 plus 30. That's what I would recommend. And sometimes I also play thematic training games. So in a particular variation, I will ask some of my friends, let's just play this variation. I'll take white. Tomorrow I'll take black. You need to have like some people who are willing to do that, as crazy as you, to do that sort of thing. And there's always a bunch of these guys around, for sure. Yeah.
So when you study like in the weekends, what do you focus on the most? Like opening, strategy, tactics? What's the most that takes your time?
So I will say this as a non-professional adult. Okay, there's a lot of disclaimer. Non-professional adult chess player who has maybe limited ambitions for the game. So you're not trying to be world champion. Let's say you just want to be a title player, for example. Forget endgames. Don't bother.
Forget it.
Yes. This is the most controversial thing I'm going to say on camera. Don't bother with endgames. You have no time for that because you just think of it. Let's just break it down logically, right? Let's say you have 2 or 3 hours a day or a week, for example. Most of us look at chess maybe at most 30 minutes a day, at most, for the adults, the working adults. You have a bunch of things to look at. Calculation, right? You need tactical training always, and you need to revise your openings. Does it make sense to train rook and bishop versus rook? Theory? Or study how many times can you study the Lucina or the Philidor, Vancouver, all these names? So I would say that there's not much point to it. Unless you are trying to calculate, you are trying to practice calculation with pawn endings, that is highly recommended. Yeah, because pawn endings are the toughest endgames to calculate. So I would say calculation is the #1 key as an adult, non-professional chess player. If you are a young aspiring kid who wants to be world champion one day, please learn your endgames. Yeah, please study the classics. Please, try to understand positional, your strategy and these things. But for the working adult, if you want results, I think that was my main strategy. I just look at calculation, and I spent a lot of time on calculation. So my tournament results were really great. And my games never end up in the end game because I just win from the middle game.
How would you practice calculation? What would you do?
So I have a coach, so he will have some positions for me, and he will just grill me, position after position, and he will just keep asking me at every time point, what are you thinking now? What are you calculating? He was just putting pressure on my mind for 4 or 5 hours straight, with very little breaks in between. Yes, because he says that in a tournament setting, you're going to be under this pressure.
So it's a kind of visualization?
Visualization and assessment.
Yeah.
And being able to see many small variations. So calculation is not about deep calculation. It's more like you're able to see short lines, but precisely. Yeah, that is actually more important than being able to see 20 lines down the road. Because most of the time, maybe you see these 20 lines down the road is correct, but you just miss a simple line on the first move. It happens very often. Yeah, so that's another topic altogether about calculation. So I would say openings, for me at least, and calculation. That was the main 2 things that I worked on. Yeah. I was on camera, yeah, so I'm going to be destroyed by all these great coaches for saying that endgames are useless. Ramesh is going to have a go at me. But this is my opinion. So, and this was this was my approach, and it worked for me. So hopefully you can try some of these things, and hopefully it works for you. I'm happy to take more questions if you like. Oh,
Then thank you so much.
thank you.